Hey good people, it's Derek here, great to have you back. So listen, I realize the title and thumbnail of this video are kind of provocative. And for those of you who know me as a proponent of the law of attraction and manifestation, you may be thinking, oh, Derek, why are you weighing into this matter that is so controversial in nature? That's not very positive or law of attraction-y of you. Well, to start, I just have to say first that being positive does not imply one needs to bury their head in the sand and avoid conflict at all costs. In fact, that's a great way of attracting more negative, is by not dealing head-on with it. Secondly, you hear quite often by proponents of LOA that once you get past culture, religion, or people's preconceived notions, the principles are fairly universal. There's nothing inherently doctrinary about the law of attraction. Most of its a priori assumptions are ones that we all espouse as being kind of self-evident. So this is why I made the video, is because I've sensed a great undercurrent of nihilism, not just among new atheists, but in our postmodern materialist society as a whole. And of course I'm using that word materialism in a philosophical sense, addressing the idea that everything is just dead random mutations of physical properties. Okay, so as I've mentioned before, those belonging to the new atheist movement often have this sort of knee-jerk reaction to people like Jordan Peterson, Bishop Robert Barron, William Lane Craig, Ravi Zacharias, John Lennox, and Richard Swinburne types. Because these religious apologists often say something to the effect that atheists aren't really atheists. Peterson often takes attack that the deep existential problems like why are we here, what's my purpose, how can I find value in a vast cosmological arena that seems to admit little basis for its own origin, are in fact profoundly religious questions. Others, like William Lane Craig, make more of an ethical argument that atheists aren't really atheists because they're interested in objective moral values and duties. And as said, the immediate reaction to this by new atheists is often stated like this: well, wait a second, are you saying that you can't be moral without a level of religiosity or an essential belief in God? Or they'll say things like, look, religion doesn't hold the monopoly on the value-related questions of existence. It doesn't own the franchise on emotion, art, prose, interpretation, so on and so forth. And then at that point, as you've likely noticed, the conversation generally breaks down into a rehashing of all the immoral things biblical literalism, fundamentalism, and institutional religiosity has blighted humanity with. And it's a tiring conversation, because the point these apologists are making is a simple self-evident one that most people accept. And that self-evident point is this: existence is better than non-existence. Why? Well, we don't know. There's nothing either of us could say to convince the other person that they really knew God does or does not exist. But what is it about consciousness and being that allows for such a searching moralistic view when all the natural order seems to leave you with is the bleak Darwinian conception that might is right and survival trumps all else, even above truth or ethics? This is what's opened up a vast conversation in philosophy called deontology, or of being. Now, most people don't even get this far in their discussion with religious apologists, so I'm glad we can finally table this and get this out of the way. But to add another element to this conversation has to do with dimensionality. And this is an area where new atheists, or those aligned with it, such as Neil deGrasse Tyson, unintentionally affirm a belief in what religious people have been saying all along. Okay, now I have to add a little bit of a footnote here. Neil deGrasse Tyson has been rather guarded in identifying himself as a full-blown atheist, but I'm justified in saying he's aligned with it, as he often uses the predictable arguments of new atheists, not least the problem of evil, entropy, material reductionism, a rejection of anecdotal evidence, and the eminent anti-Catholic rhetoric weaved throughout his Resurrection of that Carl Sagan series on Netflix entitled Cosmos. But here's how he affirms what the Bible and theologians have been saying all along. Watch this.
Question is, can you help us understand a multi-dimensional universe? What would be the dimensions we are unaware of?
Any dimension higher than the 3 that we're familiar with, or the actual 4 that we're embedded in. We live in a 4-dimensional world. And that might sound a little flaky or freaky, but consider the following fact. You have never met someone at a place unless it was also at a time. And you have never met someone at a time unless it was also at a place. That requires 4 dimensions of coordinates.
Wait. What about in a dream?
Is the dream happening inside your head?
Yes. I don't know when.
I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I just have to say this one thing. That was actually a very perceptive question of the interviewer to ask. If the implications of higher dimensional reality have anything to bear on anomalous events we've called astral travel, astral projection, remote viewing, premonition, deja vu, the Mandela effect, perhaps even telepathy or otherwise external aspects of mind. The reports of these things are largely ignored as swoons by the scientific community, despite the fact that much of these testimonials have an uncanny correlative relationship to our reality. But poor NDT didn't really pick up on that, unfortunately. I digress. Carrying on.
So the only point is, we know intuitively that we need 4 dimensions to localize someone to meet up with them. Especially when, well, only 2 dimensions if you don't have tall buildings. You have tall buildings, you need the 3rd dimension. So you don't say, I'll meet you at the 20th floor of, on 721 Park Avenue. What time? Okay? There's a full 4 dimensions going on there. So just I want to convince you we live in a 4-dimensional world for that reason. Okay. It may be that these 4 dimensions are manifest to us, but that in fact we are embedded in a higher dimensional space. And string theorists on the frontier of this exercise are hypothesizing at least 10 dimensions to account for everything we see in the universe, even if we do not directly measure those dimensions themselves. Now, with your permission, may I go on a dimensional journey with you? I'm at my desk, and the desk is a surface, okay? And I start putting pages down on the desk. I'm tiling them on the desk. And then I run out of room. I have exhausted the 2 dimensions of the surface of my desk. We have ways of accommodating this problem. And so we have page organizers that go upwards. So now when I don't have any more surface area of the desk, I can enter a 3rd dimension and put pages there. If you are an ant embedded in this 2-dimensional world of the surface of my desk, and you fill up the desk with these sheets of paper, the ant will say, there is no more room. And I say, yes, there is, watch me. And I take a piece of paper off the desk, put it in the page organizer, and according to the ant that's embedded in the 2 dimensions, that page disappeared. It disappeared into a dimension that ant does not have access to. What a brilliant invention this is. You can put practically an unlimited number of pages, far more pages above the desk than on the desk. So access to a 3rd dimension is an extraordinarily useful storage device for a 2-dimensional creature.
Does the ant trust you that what it cannot see is nevertheless there?
You have to then talk to it about this extra dimension. And then it will have to just trust you.
Yes.
Because watch what happens next. I now have my 3-dimensional room, and I'm filling it with boxes. Now I've run out of space to put the boxes. But now a 4-dimensional alien looks at us and says, I got this. Just move it into the 4th dimension. What are you talking about? And the alien comes in, reaches in, takes one of the boxes, and then the box disappears. Disappears. It went into a 4th dimension. There are things that happen in quantum physics that kind of defy our sensibilities. Like particles pop in and out of existence. They defy any rational attempt to understand it. Particles can be entangled with one another. A particle can be here, and there's a barrier, and it can spontaneously show up on the other side of the barrier at faster than the speed of light. All of this is just mysterious. Let me ask you, suppose you have a sphere, and I live in a 2-dimensional world, and you take this hollow sphere, so it's a shell, and you pass that sphere through my two-dimensional universe, how will I describe that? I will say, this point just appeared out of nowhere. Oops, now it's a circle, a small circle. And that circle's getting bigger by the moment. Oh my gosh, oh, it reached a maximum size. Now that circle is just shrinking. It's shrinking. Up, now it's a point. Now the whole thing disappeared. This would be completely freaky to a two-dimensional being. But it makes complete sense if you live in 3 dimensions and you pass a sphere through my universe. Now I want to totally blow their minds, if I can.
Oh, sure.
If I may. But you got to stay with me on this, okay? A point has no dimensions. There's no height, width, depth, so it has 0 dimensions. A line has 1 dimension, length, okay? A square has 2 dimensions, sort of height and width. A cube has 3 dimensions, height, width, depth. We got this. Now follow me. A line is 1-dimensional, but it's bounded by 2 0-dimensional things. Those are the points. 1 dimension bounded by 2 0-dimensional points. A square is 2 dimensions bounded by 4 1-dimensional sides. A cube is 3 dimensions bounded by 6 2-dimensional sides.
I think Neil deGrasse Tyson is expecting our brain to be hurting at about this point.
So in other words, the dimensions of your sides are going up. Your line is bound by 0-dimensional points. Your square is bound by 2-dimensional lines. I mean, by 1-dimensional sides. The cube is bound by 2-dimensional squares. Okay? So we're going up 2, 4, 6. 2 points, 4 sides of a square, 6 sides of a cube. And each side is 1 dimension less. They're squares on the sides of a cube. They're lines on the side of a square. They're dots on the sides of a line. Let's go up to a 4-dimensional cube. A 4-dimensional cube has 8 sides. A regular cube had 6 sides. We're going up by 2. A 4-dimensional cube has 8 sides. And each of those sides is a 3-dimensional cube. 1 dimension down from itself. In the same way, each side of a 3-dimensional cube is a 2-dimensional square. So when you get to 4 dimensions, the sides are 3-dimensional surfaces. And you can take this all the way up. And our brains can't picture what we call a hypercube, in some circles a tesseract. We can't picture a volume bounded by 3-dimensional cubes. What does it even mean? Our neurosynapses are ill-equipped to do the distance on this. And this is why we invent mathematics that can take us there.
Well, the mathematics can help us imagine it, but if we want to credit it with reality, then you have to design an experiment that somehow touches your own world.
Yes, yes. So you can invent something that you can't see if it has testable consequences in ways that you can see.
So despite my puny little brain being in herniated contortions at the moment, if I'm understanding this correctly, it would seem that there's a profound basis then to deduce logically that there are realities not limited to the bounded dimensional frontiers we're accustomed to. And that would be reasonable to assume based on anecdotal evidence and experiences that are not necessarily substantiated physically. So a belief in extrinsic forces, personal in nature or otherwise, that permeates 3-dimensional space and time are not just plausible, but consistent with the bounded dimensions we're familiar with. Why is it that if you just rehash the same tired slogans that new atheists use, you are somehow given license to present the exact same theories religious people have been raked over the coals for as being superstitious, supposititious, and nonsensical, but instead be perceived as a revolutionary scientific thinker. It's almost farcical. Okay, now here's the point. All theistic religions have affirmed a few basic points about the universe, or God, if I must resort to that word. And that is that there must be some reality out there that transcends physical and therefore temporal or time-based dimensionality. In the Bible, God has always been defined as an eternal, mental, or personal entity that represents the entirety of being. Remember what he said to Moses in the burning bush, "I am that I am." Now this is where atheists generally chime in and say, wow, is this the narrow category God has finally been relegated to? What an intellectual workaround. But it's not intellectual acrobatics at all. St. Thomas Aquinas defined God as the great I am, or state of being itself, back in the 13th century. The problem is, religion has survived thousands of years of scientific advancement, so its essential character is to be found in its stories and traditions. This is how you can have people who don't literally believe in transubstantiation, for instance, that is, that the host and the wine turn into the body and blood of Christ, but still feel that it has some spiritual significance. And this is also why biblical literalism has deeply waned in the post-Enlightenment period. So I just had to share that clip because, as I've said before, if you listen, and I mean truly listen to what people are saying, more often than not, they end up affirming the law of attraction or basic religious intuitions anyway. And I just don't see how Neil deGrasse Tyson can, in good conscience, say all this dimensional stuff religious have been affirming for years, for millennia, and maintain his alliances the way he does. If you want to learn more about this topic, please look at my other videos. I'll link it up in the description. And as I mentioned, I'm not trying to step into anything here. But if you give a hearing ear to proponents of the law of attraction with an open mind, you'll not only discover certain things you sort of believe to begin with, just on a deeper level, but also you can see how becoming attuned to these presuppositions can be useful in harnessing the power within yourself to become more, to manifest your highest potential that may otherwise have remained dormant. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and take a look at my other videos on LOA. You'll be glad you did. This is Derek London. Thanks for stopping in.